Welcome into Going for the Green as we get you ready for the Open 2021. Will Gray, Drew Dinsick, and I'm Sara Perlman with you. And guys, after 1 year off because COVID-19, the Open returns and Royal St. George's in Sandwich, England will host the event. Last year was the first time since World War II the major was not played. So Drew, Will, I imagine you guys like me are even more excited for the Open Championship this year.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm as an American over here, I'm ready to set up for coffee golf. Get the alarms ready. You're going to be there all morning, and then the rebroadcast hits in the middle of the afternoon. It's going to be a lot of fun to see not only this course, but really to get back to Open Championship golf. We missed it a lot last year. It's one of the great tournaments on the calendar, and good to have it back this year.
Yeah, if I'm going to watch as much as Will's going to watch, I'm going to need something stronger than coffee because it tees off at like 3 a.m. my time. So it's going to be tough for me to catch all of the early opening round matchups. That's just going to be set your lineups, set your head-to-heads, and then, set the alarm clock and peek at the scoreboard and then try to catch some more Zs.
Now, I work a lot with Drew every single weekday, and I know for a fact Drew looks at his phone and goes back to bed after he checks the score. So I'm sure he'll be doing that with coffee or whatever his beverage of choice is. We love betting golf, and on today's show, we will give you our breakdown, best bets, fantasy picks, sleepers, you name it. But for now, let's take a look at the odds here, of course, provided by PointsBet, and Jon Rahm is the betting favorite. 8-1, Brooks Koepka, 17-1, Jordan Spieth, and Rory McIlroy, 18-1, Xander Schauffele, 18-1, and we will get through all of them at the end of the board here. Viktor Hovland sitting at 30-1 to win the Open Championship. And I'll begin with you here as we start our show. And I look at Jon Rahm, the betting favorite. Will, he has a legitimate shot going back-to-back in majors, coming off of a win at Torrey Pines. He's actually looking to become the seventh golfer ever to win the U.S. Open and Open Championship in the same year. I leave it to you. Can he do it? Are these odds good enough?
Yes and no. So I think that he absolutely can. The market is really showing a lot of respect to Jon Rahm, not only after the U.S. Open win, but after last week's performance at the Scottish Open, where he finished seventh and looked really good coming off of that major championship victory. You wondered, was there going to be any rust? And there was none. So he has really put himself above the rest of the upper echelon here. When you look back at the odds from Torrey Pines in the U.S. Open, it was kind of bunched. He was the favorite at plus 1,000, but there were a lot of guys there at 11, 12, 13. Now he's at 8. Everyone else is at 17 or 20. So that shows how much respect is built into the price. For me, on this venue at this event, it's a little too short for me. Jon Rahm finished T11 at Royal Portrush 2 years ago, but that was his first time inside the top 40 in the Open Championship. Certainly he's a different player now than he was even 2 years ago, let alone 3 or 4 years ago. But listen, Sara, we'll get into it more in a few minutes, but this is a weird course where weird things tend to happen. One player a few years back called it the world's largest pinball machine. The ball is going to be bouncing sideways, whether you like it or not. So I am going to be leaning much more towards the back half of the card. I'm going to backload my bets with some longer shots and cross my fingers rather than trying to load up on the front.
I love it. Well, I'm going to get to another kind of topic here in a second with you, Drew, but your thoughts on Jon Rahm altogether here?
I think Will stated it well. It is obvious to anyone with eyes, anyone with numbers, that Jon Rahm is the best golfer in the world right now. And actually, the speed at which he has come up on the field and is so clearly the best has caught me by surprise. I honestly, it was probably for the Masters, we were like, can you believe how competitive this is? There's like 8, 9, 10 guys all with about equal chance of winning it. And now it's like, oh yeah, Jon Rahm has twice as good of a chance as the next best guy to win this tournament. That is a huge shift in terms of just overall, advantage over the field. But that said, Torrey Pines was a perfect storm for him for the U.S. Open. It was his first major. We talked about it all year leading into that event, how that course was just a perfect fit for him to get that first ever slam out of the way. And on top of that, he had a little bit of putting luck, I would say. He made some extremely clutch putts on Sunday, like low likelihood of making type of putts to clinch that victory. And so, yes, you saw him play amazingly well in the Scottish Open last week, but he left a lot of putts on the course. His strokes game putting was not good. And is that a little bit of regression because, putting is somewhat random, possibly, but he's going to need the same kind of putting luck that he had at Torrey Pines and the same kind of just flawless game from a approach that he had down in San Diego here in England. And, for a price like 8-1, that's probably not good enough to get me involved. My fare on him is plus 1010. So right away, there's no edge based on numbers alone for him to win this. But, Will's colleague, Paige McKenzie at the Golf Channel, who we just talked to, made a great point, which is that, like, if the odds drift on him live, he should be able to sustain, solid play throughout the weekend, much better than some of the other players who may have a fluky round 1, round 2, with the pinball nature, as Will pointed out. So I'm going to be keeping a very close eye on the live market and looking for opportunities to pounce on a number for Rahm that's drifted a little bit too far, and then maybe he does pick up his second major here.
I'm curious to get both of your thoughts on this. We look at the last time the Open was played here in 2011. Obviously, some players have now returned. How much can you even look at 10 years ago and have it play into factors of odds of this tournament in particular? I look at the stats from back then. Phil, DJ tied for second, Rickie tied for 5, Sergio tied for 9th. What does that mean to you in regards to this week, Will?
I think it's similar to what we went through with the PGA Championship at Kiowa a couple months ago, which was played there for the first time since 2012. And I think that the conclusion was it helps the guys that played well there last time, but I wouldn't read too much into a missed cut from 10 years ago. So when you see guys like DJ and Phil, certainly they had a great chance. Dustin Johnson, better than Phil. DJ put it out of bounds on the 14th hole to really kind of give the trophy to Darren Clarke. But then I look at a guy like Rickie Fowler, who, fell off the radar, is starting to come back, did finish T5 at this event 10 years ago. And I spoke to him a couple weeks ago in Detroit, and he talked about how important it was to avoid the bunkers at this course. There's a ton of bunkers, and it is not easy to get up and down. I think 34% is the up and down rate in 2011 for just getting up and down from greenside bunkers, which is crazy low for PGA Tour pros. So the guys that were here 10 years ago, it's not exactly fresh. It's not top of mind. But I think when they get back there after a couple of rounds, some of the lines are going to return to them, some of the targets of where to play and where to play away from. Those are the things that they'll start to remember, and potentially a good finish last time could lead to a better finish this time.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I would even say there are some hidden factors kind of in just sort of links style golf that, a lot of these younger guys who are just bursting onto the scene, the likes of the Collin Morikawas of the world, who they haven't played a lot of golf on this style of course. And there's going to be a learning curve. They may learn fast. These guys are amazing golfers. They have a level of play that is well beyond sort of the typical kind of progression through the rankings of golf that we used to think of like 10 years ago. But that said, it's still going to be difficult for them to adjust on the fly to this type of course. You've heard quotes already from Morikawa talking about the firmness of the fairways and how his iron shots are looking coming off of this surface, and that sort of stuff, if you've done it once, if you've played this style of golf regularly, which is, of course, why we see the European players tend to perform a little bit better at the Open. It's just the style is a little bit more accustomed to the way they learn the game, on top of the fact that they have just more experience on links type of golf courses. And so,
sure,
those factors, I think, are more important than, 10 years ago, you had a hot weekend here.
Correct. Dustin Johnson, just 2 top 10s on the PGA Tour this calendar year. It's tough to look back 10 years ago and see how he performed. Well, your thoughts on Morikawa? We talked about him a little bit. Drew touched on him. What do you make of him?
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to bring up, some of the points that Drew hit on there in terms of quotes are coming out this week that Morikawa, listen, he is by order of magnitude the best iron player in the world right now. He is so good with the irons, but now he doesn't have any links golf experience, and this is really a different style of play. He came over last week, and he's already telling reporters, listen, I'm having a tough time adjusting to how firm the ground is, and my irons are not coming off as flush as I expect them to. And so this is weird. You have some guys that are really in the top 10 or 20 in the world. You think of Morikawa, a major champion, Victor Hovland, who's really an established name. He'll be on the Ryder Cup in a couple months. This is their first Open. And, part of it is because of how fast they came onto the scene. Part of it is the cancellation last year. But when you're handicapping these fields, you're used to guys maybe only having 1 or 2 trips at a certain event. But this is the Open Championship debut for some really talented guys. I think you do need to bake that somewhat into the equation and take it into consideration.
And Drew, we know that Europeans tend to play well here, both on the links and, of course, at the Open. So who stands out? Who should we keep an eye out for this week?
Well, there are specific aspects to certain players' games that I think you need to upweight. Most notably, let's go with driving, for instance. Like, there are a lot of courses on the PGA Tour where driving distance trumps driving accuracy, and it's not close. I would flip that here. I think accuracy is probably going to be more important than driving distance. This isn't an especially arduous course from a length standpoint. And like as Will brought up, if you get penalized because you're in a especially difficult situation, be it bunker, be it the rough, you can find yourself out of this in a hurry. And so accuracy, I think, is a premium here over distance. And then similarly, if you are the type of player that has the ability to produce magic on the greens, from a putting standpoint, you're going to be able to get a few cheap strokes gained here that could be the difference between winning and losing. And there are a lot of golfers on the European Tour who kind of fit that profile. Ian Poulter, probably the first that pops into my mind, kind of in that regard. And I think if you wanted to take a swing on a Poulter at a top 20 price at in the plus 240 range, that's a fair way to approach it. But really, there are a lot of European and for that matter, South Africans, for that matter, Australians, who kind of fit this profile of performing well on a course like this, where distance is less of a premium and what you can do on the green may matter more.
Absolutely. I mean, I very much share Drew's handicap there. I think that the other part you have to look at is some of the longer players. You think of a guy like Bryson or even someone like Rahm, who's longer in terms of a European. They're not going to be able to hit the driver on every hole. You're going to have to lay back with a wood or with a 3-iron to avoid cross bunkers on certain holes. So this is probably a week where I'm more interested in taking a guy like Aaron Rai at 20-1 for top English player than maybe Rory McIlroy at 20-1 to win the entire tournament, because I think that you have to factor in those sort of quirks. And to Drew's point, I'm looking at guys who are pretty straight, who have a strong links background. A guy like Rai, as I said, he won the Scottish Open last year. It was different. It was in the COVID bubble, so to speak, but it still counts. And he's starting to play better on links golf. And you do need someone who's going to be magical on and around those greens, because you're going to have some shots where you're going to have to be hitting out sideways from bunkers, but eventually you're going to have to make those 15 or 20 footers. So a player like Aaron Rai, who has been finishing pretty well in recent weeks inside the top 35, had the top 15 finish a couple weeks ago. So he's someone that I think maybe the market is underpricing, because you have so much brand name loyalty attached to some of the guys at the top of the European market when you think of Rory and Rahm and Tyrrell Hatton and players like that.
I am happy you brought that up, because 18-20-1 for Rory does seem a little short, coming off of an Irish Open where he did struggle, then miss the cut at the Scottish Open. So that's a great point. A lot more to come here on Going for the Green. We will get into fantasy plays and best bets shortly. Sharpen your handicap for Royal St. George's by utilizing the new collection of golf betting tools available exclusively to NBC Sports EDGE Premium subscribers. DFS users can view player projections and access lineup optimizers, while the EDGE Driver tool allows users to create customized searches and analyze the betting favorites across hundreds of variables. Use the code GREEN10 to get 10% off any monthly or annual subscription.
Welcome to NBC Sports EDGE, your one stop for everything fantasy, DFS, and more. Get up-to-date news and insights from our award-winning analysts. Looking to raise your game even more? NBC Sports EDGE Plus helps you level up with an array of premium tools and resources, keeping you ahead of the pack. Learn more at NBCSportsEdge.com.
We're getting you ready for the Open Championship 2021 here on Going for the Green. Will Gray, Drew Dinsick, and I'm Sara Perlman with you. And a big part of our show, being partners with PointsBet, we get to see where the money is coming in and where people are laying cash for the tournament. And maybe this will surprise you guys, I'm not sure, but Jordan Spieth, 18-1, has the most bets in bet count and by handle. So people are loving Spieth. Are either of you guys involved on Jordan Spieth in this tournament, and do you see this as a solid play? Drew, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I don't see value at 18-1, but I understand exactly why people are highlighting him as a guy that's sort of in the upper class at the top of the board who is worth taking a shot on at the price. Jordan Spieth, obviously, the way we set up this, particularly the driving accuracy over distance, particularly the ability to produce magic on the green, that's Jordan Spieth. And so it shouldn't surprise anyone that by my projections, he is the second choice to win this title. That said, I would have made his price closer to 20 to 1. So I'm not going to bet 18 to 1. But it is this, if he is in the mix on Sunday, I will be 0% surprised.
I think, Sarah, that after saying how much I love, looking at long shots here, if I'm looking at the top of the board, I do think that Jordan Spieth is the pick of the litter there because of what Drew just said, that a lot of the traits that Spieth has in spades really align well with what you need at Royal St. George's. I, as a potential Spieth backer in that 18 to 20 to 1 region, was a little concerned to see that he's already leading in both tickets and handle at PointsBet. He is clearly the most popular play. That is not exactly the best sign on a Tuesday. But listen, when you look at the Edge driver tools on NBC Sports Edge, and you look at links golf specifically, you look at how guys have played over the last 6-7 years at the Open Championship. Jordan Spieth leads this field in strokes gained total. He's inside the top 3 in strokes gained approach and tee to green. It is very clear. Listen, he didn't just by chance win this thing 4 years ago at Royal Birkdale, the last time it was held in England. He is such a strong ball striker. He does have that extra touch on and around the greens. There's a reason why he tends to succeed in these sort of events. And so the numbers, at least right now, do back it up. But I'm with Drew in terms of the number in terms of price could be getting a little too short if you want to buy in.
And then Brooks Koepka is the second most bet golfer, both by bet count and by handle. Let me ask you this, if this surprises you. First off, DJ, not even in the top 20 for most bet golfers. Obviously, formerly world number 1, finished tied for second last time. We talked about that. Is that shocking to either of you?
Not really. He really has not shown us much of any sign of current form. And again, some players, some handicappers would tell you current form is overrated. I'm not one of those people. I tend to upweight current form relative to sort of the public models out there. But really, since he kind of completed his sort of career lifelong goal of winning the Masters, it just hasn't looked like he is especially inspired to go win golf tournaments. So I get why people are cool on him. But I also can tell you that we will do one of these shows one of these days and be like, oh my God, can you believe Dustin Johnson was overlooked? Because he still has the quality to absolutely put distance on this field and to kind of regain world number 1 at some point. I just don't know that it's going to be on the back of this tournament.
I actually am a little surprised that he didn't get more love this week already, just because he had such a great performance in 2011. He tied for second. He had the tournament sitting on his club in the middle of the 14th fairway, and it sprayed right out of bounds. And listen, this is a guy who now the computers have moved him back to world number 1 by the thinnest of margin over Jon Rahm, even though, as we said at the open of the show, Jon Rahm feels like the best player in the world. The markets are showing that as well. But DJ does have the ability to kind of turn it on. We've seen him at St. Andrews before, just kind of blitz the field for a 65 or a 66. Now he eventually throws in a 74 to really kind of keep that. But listen, this is a course where he has had a lot of success. So I personally am surprised that more people haven't just pulled up the page from 2011 and say, oh, DJ finished T2. He must love it here. He's number 1 in the world. Let me throw some money on him at 20 to 1.
I'm going to give out some big bets here. These are big bets that PointsBet has taken already. I'm sure more will come in. These did not come from me. I wish they did, but I'll tell you them fairly quickly. $1,000. You mentioned Ian Poulter at 90 to 1 would of course win $90,000. Another one, $2,000 was placed on Morikawa, would win a cool $60K. And I will say another $1,000 on Victor Hovland to net $30,000. So keep an eye out for some of these bigger bets placed by not me. Okay, now we talk about the course, and this is going to be tricky, and I'm curious to get both of your opinions because weather is going to play a huge role on this links course. Well, I will begin with you how this changes or makes your betting strategy different than a normal tournament.
Absolutely. I mean, this is the most unpredictable major in terms of the weather from a consistent basis because it always rains at some point in July in England or Scotland. It looks like Thursday is going to be the wettest day this week, but the wind is going to be up. You're looking at 10 to 20 mile an hour sustained winds for most of the 4 days. So yes, there will be lulls in the morning or in the afternoon where you might get more calm conditions, but eventually everyone in this field is going to have to deal with crosswinds and breezes that are going to kick up, which are going to make it even more difficult to avoid some of the really penal spots on this course. You think of the cross bunkers and stuff like that. The area that appeals to me about the Open is the other 3 majors everyone goes off of number 1 and 10 tee Thursday and Friday. The Open Championship, everyone is teeing off number 1. So they're starting at 6:30 in the morning. You have groups teeing off until 3 in the afternoon. So if you look, especially in that first round, if you're looking at 3 balls, or if you're looking at maybe some live markets to get down on someone who hasn't hit a shot yet, you're going to have a lot of play that you will have already seen. You'll get an idea of what the scoring is, where the strengths are, where the weaknesses are from people that teed off 7, 8, 9 hours before and have already completed their rounds. You can then factor that into your handicap of some of those late 3 balls in the afternoon.
Playing off that, Drew, I know you are always involved in the live betting market. For someone that's maybe getting into golf betting now or trying to up their handicapping game, how crucial is it to watch the beginning of the day to kind of see how you can bet later on?
Well, there are some courses where you're expecting a huge difference in conditions between the morning wave and the PM wave, and that can create a massive advantage one way or the other in terms of first round leader market or, head to head if guys are split between those 2 waves. I think for this particular tournament, and because the weather is a little bit unpredictable, I'm only accounting for about a 0.1 difference in strokes gained for the morning wave relative to the afternoon wave. So that I don't expect to really get a ton of data in the morning that's going to change my opinion on the afternoon players for this tournament. And I don't see any obvious ways to attack that for now. All that could change though. And honestly, credit to you, those who live in England and get out of bed every morning when it's this cold and rainy in the month of July. I do not know how they do it. I could not do it, but it's
Drew's California always cool, loving the weather on the West Coast.
I don't get it. I don't understand it.
Now, this course, of course, on the rugged shores of the English Channel, and Will, you did allude to it earlier, it produces unpredictable bounces. Now, taking all that into consideration, no Open last year. What's the biggest factor in handicapping this tournament before we get to the next topic?
I think for me, it's going to be temperament. I think that I look at a player like Bryson, who is going to be frustrated by this tournament and by this course. Eventually, everyone is going to get bad breaks. Everyone is going to end up like 6 inches in front of a lip of a bunker where you have to play backwards. And it's who is going to be able to deal with those bad breaks and move on quickly. I look at a guy like Marcus Armitage, who is not very well known to the American audience, but he's from England. He's very affable. Didn't expect to be in this tournament. He's one of those guys that I feel like is going to be able to brush off a bad break and say, hey, this is great. I'm playing in the Open. So if I can get a long ticket on him to either be a top 30, top 40, make the cut, those sort of numbers, those are kind of the guys that I'm backing. We already discussed a lot of the traits you're going to need. I'm putting accuracy ahead of distance. I actually think you might be paying a penalty for distance because the one thing we've already heard from course conditions is that the rough is really thick, even for Open Championship standards. So if you stray off the fairway, you are going to pay a price. You're going to have to be able to make the putts on and around the greens. I think that some short game wizardry might be mitigated because the bunkers are so difficult to get up and down out of. But for the most part, I want someone who has a measured game. I don't need to hit it 320 off the tee like we did at Kiowa, like we did at Torrey Pines. This is a bit of the flip side. You can play the control game. If you're bunting it out there 290 off the tee, it's going to run pretty far on these firm and baked out fairways. So this is definitely a different skill set that I'll be looking at versus what we saw or what we were looking for in the last 2 majors.
A lot to consider here. We have the prop market and best bets coming up in just a minute. But if you're looking for even more betting coverage on the green and beyond, make sure to check out our podcast, Bet the Edge, powered by PointsBet, is live Monday through Friday to arm you with all of the actionable information you need to wager with confidence. Our crew provides you with unique statistical data, trends, and projections using our Edge betting tools, which our PointsBet partner helps power with real-time live updating odds. So whether you're eyeing the futures market, looking at player props, targeting some over-unders, or on the fence with an against-the-spread bet, give our podcast a listen to give you that extra edge. We'll be right back. Now, this is arguably our favorite part of the show as we finally get into our favorite plays. We all want to get money down and get involved in the betting space of the Open Championship. And this is where we get to talk about the top finisher markets. You guys, as I know now for a few shows of Going for the Green, love the nationality markets. So I'll begin with the top finisher markets. And Drew, I will start with you here. We're looking at top 10, top 20, make, miss, cut, wherever you want to take it. What stands out?
So I agreed with Will's sort of thesis, which is that this is going to be a long shots type of tournament. However, you need to bet a lot of 100-to-1s and a lot of, you need to have a pretty huge portfolio of long shots if you actually want to do want to cash one. So I'm going to instead attack more of the top 20 market because that same edge tends to trickle down into the derivatives. And I think there are a lot of players who are being overlooked in sort of the 81 to 100-to-1 range who can land in the top 20. I already mentioned Ian Poulter. I absolutely think he is going to be a factor in this contest when it's all said and done, just based almost purely off of the strength of his putting game. And then we haven't mentioned him to this point, but Brian Harman I have as a relatively high likelihood of finishing in the top 20. Again, a player who was favored last week, did not have an especially good performance at the John Deere. However, he got out of there pretty quickly, got over to Europe and has adjusted to the time and gotten himself into position to be able to play particularly well this weekend. Great general overall game in terms of course fit for this course by my numbers. So I played Brian Harman to finish in the top 220 at plus 300 as well.
Great value there at plus 300. Will, what about you?
I'm going a little bit longer with my numbers, but still staying in the name recognition ballpark. And I'm going to start with Rickie Fowler. I like him at plus 650 for a top 10 finish. I know we've kind of been ragging on Rickie over the last few months, wondering, is he going to be exempt from majors? He needed a special invite at the PGA Championship, but I am seeing signs of him turning around his game. He's putting, a round or a round and a half or 2 rounds together, and eventually he's going to get that back on track for 3 or 4 rounds. If you go back to 2017, 8 of his last 16 major championship finishes have been T12 or better. That includes a top 10 finish at Royal Portrush 2 years ago that got him into this week's field. We know he needed that special invite at the PGA, but he did finish tied for 8th at Kiowa. There are some promising signs to show that Rickie may be making a comeback like we've seen with so many other big names, Jordan Spieth, especially, Rory McIlroy back in the winner's circle this year. I think Fowler is trending in the right direction, and this is still a pretty appetizing price on him. Not to win. He could still, be around on the 18th green to shake the winner's hand, but if he's in the top 10, you're still going to cash a ticket. And then one other guy is a major champion in Danny Willett at plus 600 for a top 20 finish. I feel like he's, again, flying under the radar. Some of these mid-tier Europeans and Englishmen, there's still some value to be had there. We talked about the 2011 Open Championship. I'm going to do you one better. Danny Willett won the English Amateur at Royal St. George's in 2007. So take that for what you will. But this is at least a course where he has won before. He has 3 top 20s in his last 5 starts at the Open Championship and is starting to play well. He's a big game hunter where he plays better at the Rolex Series events, at the majors, at he's won the BMW PGA Championship. So in terms of European golf, and even on this side of the Atlantic, he tends to play better in some of the bigger events.
At a course like this, you'd like to believe familiarity is key and could only help. Now, I know you guys love the nationality prop market. It's something we talk about all the time when we do these shows and discuss majors. So, Drew, where are we going here?
A lot of ways to attack this, and honestly, the fewer participants in any of these markets in general, the lower the vig you're going to be trying to beat. So keep that in mind as I tend to steer clear of the top English, top US, just because you might as well bet into the top 20 at that point. But as you go kind of move down the card, there are a couple that stand out. Pretty obviously, top continental European, Jon Rahm. I'm shocked that this is a positive number. He is going up against a handful of other players that you would know their names. Obviously, Viktor Hovland, obviously Sergio Garcia, but it gets very lean after that. And Jon Rahm, as we've kind of covered ad nauseum to this point, is so clearly the best player in the world and so likely by my numbers to finish in the top 10 that I have to have him as the top continental European at plus 160. Just in general, the high variance of Viktor Hovland's game kind of kicks him out of my consideration for a market like this. So Jon Rahm at plus 160 is valued by my numbers. And then I'm going to go with the top Aussie as well. There's been a lot of buzz about some of the Aussie players who have been playing well so far this season, who are kind of sneak up the board, notably the Mark Leishmans, the Adam Scotts, and then a player who's been extremely competitive this particular cycle in the European swing in Lucas Herbert. And I personally think Jason Day is being completely overlooked. If you want to talk about a player whose putting game I have the utmost respect for and who is flying under the radar at this point, I think pretty clearly he is the top Aussie by my prices. I would have made him about plus 4,500 to win the tournament overall, whereas Herbert I have at plus 6,900. I have Leishman at plus 5,800, and Scott is well down my board. So I think Jason Day finishes as top Aussie is a really, really solid play at plus 550.
You both have convinced me to get involved in the nationality market. If you are newer to golf betting, you'll realize it's almost impossible to pick an outright winner. The prop market is the way to go, and these two tend to nail the nationality market. Will, what do you have?
So I will start by using some of Drew's logic against him. Well, not against him, but I loved his analysis at the U.S. Open for Joaquin Niemann for top South American. It was at a short price. It was minus 125 or thereabouts, and Niemann ended up winning that market because he was head and shoulders above the competition. I'm looking similarly to the top Swede. Drew mentioned, you look for the shorter markets, you have less vig. There's only 4 Swedes in the field this week, and Henrik Stenson is the 2016 Open champion, is going to get a lot of attention because he did win this tournament in dramatic fashion a few years ago. But Alex Noren at minus 125 is the head of the class, and deservedly so. He has 2 top 10 finishes in recent years at the Open. He played well at the Rocket Mortgage Classic on the PGA Tour a couple years ago. He has the low trajectory that you need to deal with links golf, especially if the wind kicks up. And I think that when you're looking at a 4-man race here where Stenson is his number might be influenced by his past history in this event, I think don't overthink it and just take Alex Noren because he is the best Swede of the bunch that is running 4 deep this week at Royal St. George's. And then another one that I have my eye on because it's a pop quiz for bookmakers in the top Asian market. And what do you do when Masters champion Hideki Matsuyama withdraws because he has tested positive for COVID-19? This is a wide open market right now. It is topped by CT Pan at plus 400. But I really like Takumi Kanaya, plus 550, a former top-ranked amateur who is starting to get his footing at the professional level. He finished T28 and T17 in his 2 most recent starts, including at the Irish Open a couple weeks ago. So he's got a little bit of links experience. He knows what it takes to play on the European Tour. And I think that there's not a lot of star power in this top Asian market. It's not going to take a ton of success this week. Maybe a top 20 or a top 30 finish could win that top Asian market. And I think that the price is right on Takumi Kanaya at plus 550.
We have all the nationality markets covered. Still to come, best daily fantasy plays, and of course, outright winner and best bets to wrap up the show. This week, NBC Sports Predictor, powered by PointsBet, features a special golf pick'em contest for the Open Championship with a massive $100,000 jackpot. Be sure to get your picks in before Thursday morning for your chance to win big. Getting everybody geared up for the Open Championship 2021. It's been a long 24 months without it, and we are fired up to bring on Patrick McDonald to finally get a little bit of insight here on Daily Fantasy, some of my favorite. Patrick, thanks so much for joining the show. Hope you are doing great. I always start you off when we discuss majors with the most important question that everybody that plays fantasy golf is looking for. Players who present the most value. Who are we trying to target for this weekend?
Well, Sara, Will, it's awesome to join you for the Open. And the DraftKings pricing actually came out last week during the John Deere Classic, and there are some surprising head-scratching prices. You had Sam Burns under $7,000, Harris English in the low $7,000 range. But I don't want to overcomplicate things. I like Daniel Berger at $7,400. He's a top 20 player in the world and is playing some of the best golf of his career. His skill set theoretically should fit the bill of an Open Championship type test. He's straight off the tee, precise with his irons, and his short game is finally starting to click. And in some of these big time events so far this year, he's been able to kind of backdoor top 10. I'm looking at the players in the U.S. Open, and there's going to be good chalk and there's going to be bad chalk, right? He'll probably be in that 10 to 15% owned range, but I'm willing to go to him to kind of save some salary and hope to differentiate my lineups elsewhere.
I am looking in a similar vein for someone who I don't think is going to be hugely owned, but I do think is going to get some attention, deservedly so. It's $7,900. How about Shane Lowry? Talk about not overthinking it. What about the defending champion? I think that there are a lot of people that might swerve him because he is a defending champion. You don't think that the guy is really going to go back-to-back. The last person to do it was actually an Irishman, Paddy Harrington, in 07 and 08. But I think that Shane Lowry is starting to round into form. He has top 10 finishes this year at TPC Sawgrass, at the Memorial, and at the PGA Championship, where he tied for fourth. And I think that he's just in a really good headspace now, being able to defend this title finally 2 years later and coming in with a little bit of momentum. I don't think that there's a ton of pressure on him to necessarily validate or back up his Open Championship breakthrough from 2 years ago at Royal Portrush, when basically the entire island was behind him. But I do think that Shane Lowry could be in for a really big week, and at $7,900 for salary, you don't need much more than a top 10 or top 15 finish to really validate taking him at that price.
Arguably just as important as finding players of value are finding players that will most likely underperform and that we need to fade. Patrick, who are we fading?
Well, I think the easy choice at the top is going to be Bryson at 9,900, but I don't even think he deserves the fade connotation. So I'm actually going to go with Justin Thomas at 9,600. People are going to look at that Scottish Open performance, see a top 10 finish, and think everything's just fine and dandy. But I think they'll be a bit misinformed. He lost strokes with his irons for the second straight start. He hasn't done that since 2019, and he's becoming increasingly reliant on his short game, whether that's around the green or with his new putter. But I don't love that when it comes to JT, and if that struggle with his irons continues this week, I feel like he could struggle.
Yeah, I don't necessarily love anytime a player goes to a new putter heading into an Open Championship or any major. That's not a huge sign for me. So I'm with you on being a little bit hesitant with JT, but I'm looking a little bit further down the list at 8,600 in Paul Casey. And I think there's a lot of Europeans to look for, a lot of Englishmen playing in their home country this week. Paul Casey does not fit the bill for me. He has had very little success in the Open Championship. He has 2 top 10 finishes, but they came in 08 and 2010, and the 2010 especially was on St. Andrews, which is kind of, a beast of its own. And I don't know that really portends to success this week at Royal St. George's. He was outside the top 50 in 18 and 19 at this event, even though he was playing some really good golf. So I think that Paul Casey is having a bit of a renaissance in his early 40s overall, but his game much more fits the venues that you see in the U.S. that you might see at a PGA Championship or even at the Masters versus the links style play that you need to succeed in the Open.
And Patrick, we always need to get a value, a sleeper play. We call it in the fantasy space around 6 to 7K, wherever you play, DraftKings, Yahoo, FanDuel. Someone that's worth considering to really round out your roster to be competitive come Sunday. Who is that? So for the sake of the Open, you got to go with kind of a not well-known European, I feel like, and that's going to be Bernd Wiesberger for me. He's been one of the best iron players in the world over the past couple of months. He's just not that big name over here in the States, at least, and he just won in Denmark in May, and he missed a cut at the U.S. Open, but still gained more than 4 strokes with his irons. He's since backed it up with the top 5 in Germany, where he's second on approach. Last week in Scotland, top 10 in approach. So the irons are there. He's a proven European Tour winner. And he's just really a hot putting week away from kind of being that sneaky European who randomly wins a major. I feel like he really fits that profile. And at $7,100 on DraftKings, I think he's worthy of consideration. Well, you have a sleeper pick?
Yeah, Patrick's trying to play this, crazy unheard of European. The guy was like 25th in the world. People know who Bernd Wiesberger is, but I'm with you. 7,100 is a great price on him. I'm back in the handicap. I will go with perhaps a less. We mentioned him earlier in the show, but definitely a less known European. I'm back in the bullet. Marcus Armitage, $6,400. I think that he has the disposition to deal with the bad breaks of Royal St. George's. He got his European Tour victory a couple weeks ago at the BMW International Open. That helped get him into the U.S. Open, where he actually played pretty well for about 27 holes at Torrey Pines. Eventually missed the cut by a couple of shots, but it was not like he totally flamed out. So I think that playing back home, getting back in front of the crowds, he's one of those guys who's really going to feed off of having those crowds. They're talking about upwards of 32,000 people per day on the grounds at Royal St. George's. I think he's going to have, as he says, the time of his life at this event, and I think he's got the game to back up what could be a pretty solid showing for a guy in that price range. We have our best bets and outright winner picks with Patrick, Drew, Will, and I coming up on the next block to wrap up the show. In case you haven't heard by now, our Players News app is back, and it's better than ever. You can get all of our signature player news updates, favorite players, receive mobile alerts, and more with the new NBC Sports EDGE app. Just search for NBC Sports EDGE in the Apple App Store or Google Play App Store. Stick around.
Welcome to NBC Sports EDGE, your one stop for everything fantasy, DFS, and more. Get up-to-date news and insights from our award-winning analysts. Looking to raise your game even more? NBC Sports EDGE Plus helps you level up with an array of premium tools and resources keeping you ahead of the pack. Learn more at NBCSportsEdge.com.
You are watching Going for the Green as we are previewing and doing our best to get you ready for the Open 2021. And we wrap up the show, as we always do, on Going for the Green with our favorite bets leading into the weekend. I'm talking about one prop bet that stands out and the outright winner, the toughest market to navigate, especially on a links course like this. Drew, I will begin with you. I'm looking for your favorite bets on the board and, of course, the outright winner.
My favorite bet on the board is somewhat controversial. So bear with me, guys.
Let's do it.
I'm taking Rory McIlroy to miss the cut at plus 300. I am scoring him so far off of market in terms of his likelihood to win this tournament, on top of the fact that if you break down some of his game, some of his play the last couple of weeks, his driver looks like he's got the yips or something's going on. I really think he's going to be penalized at this course pretty aggressively, and in no way, shape, or form am I anywhere close to his market price to win this tournament. I have him as the 42nd best golfer in this field by my numbers, and I will take him to miss the cut at a very generous plus 300.
To miss the cut. It looks like Will's having a heck of a reaction. So before I get to your favorite prop bet,
41 players. We're gonna have to do another show to talk about the 41 players that Drew has on his spreadsheet ahead of Rory McIlroy. Listen,
I'm almost embarrassed to say some of them.
That show will come up next after Going for the Green. No, it will not.
Yeah, you absolutely. Listen, he prefaced it accordingly. I was braced for impact, and it still was a little bit jarring. He did miss the cut in 2019, of course, flaming out with that opening round at Royal Portrush. But plus 300, okay, I'm writing this stuff down. So I'm going to go with a more conventional bet. I'm going to take Harris English minus 114 in his head-to-head matchup with Webb Simpson. Harris English is playing the best golf of his career, coming off of the win at the Travelers Championship. He was third at the U.S. Open before that. The week before that, he was in the final group at the Palmetto Championship. And Harris English, believe it or not, has made 13 straight cuts in major championships. Hasn't missed the weekend in a major. He has played since 2014. On the flip side, there is something wrong with Webb Simpson. I don't know what. I know that he's had some injury issues. He had to withdraw from the Quail Hollow Championship because of a bad neck in his hometown. But he has played 8 competitive rounds since mid-April. He has missed the cut in his last 2 starts at the U.S. Open and the Rocket Mortgage Classic. I know that he played well here 10 years ago, but I don't know that that's quite enough to figure out what's ailing Webb Simpson. I'm riding one of the hottest hands in the field this week in Harris English, a guy who plays well in the majors, has played well in the Open Championship before. I think that he is the one who beats Webb Simpson in a head-to-head where I'm getting nearly even money.
So we have Rory to miss the cut, a head-to-head so far for best bet. So we're loving this. Patrick, no pressure, but you better have a good best bet ready. What do you have?
Well, I'm hoping Alex Noren can finish in the top 10 for Will's top Swede bet, because I'm on Henrik Stenson to finish inside the top 20 at 10-1. Since 2008, he has 10 starts in the Open Championship, and he's finished inside the top 10 in 6 of them. I know it's not peak Stenson we're dealing with, one of the best iron players in the world. He took out his trusty 3-wood a couple years back, but the game is starting to come together. The irons have been great recently, and I think his experience on links golf cannot be understated, especially at a difficult track like Royal St. George's that has a reputation of being very tough around the greens. That kind of mitigates his short game woes and kind of levels the playing field from that area of the game, and that only helps Stenson's chances.
Patrick, I stick with you. Outright winner. Who we taking?
It's Patrick Cantlay for me at 30-1. Yeah, probably a surprise, but from a statistical viewpoint, he's a carbon copy of Xander Schauffele, and you're getting him at double the number. He's taken down Morikawa, Rahm, and JT this year, so he's kind of comfortable in that position. It's just about getting to Sunday for him. He hasn't done it in a major yet, but if he does get there, I think he gets it done.
True.
At the current numbers, at PointsBet, my biggest edge for outright winner is on Collin Morikawa, 35-1. I'm riding with my guy. He was very, very solid for me at the U.S. Open. I think he backs it up, finds his form on this links-style golf course, first ever competition. You're getting a better price than you would normally get just because of that uncertainty. I think Morikawa is going to be in the mix.
All right, Will, bring us home. Outright winner. Give me a long shot
Yeah. See, it's almost like you knew it was coming here. So I'm standing behind the 3-point line because we're definitely going to go from deep range here. This tournament, you go back since the advent of the world rankings in 1986, only 4 players from outside the top 100 in the world have won a major. 2 of them have happened on this golf course. Darren Clarke in 11, Ben Curtis in 2003. You look back since 2003 at the Open, only 3 times has the winner hit less than 60% of their greens in regulation. Twice were on this course in 03 and 11, whereas compared to 2 years ago at Royal Portrush, Shane Lowry hit 79% of his greens. So this is a weird week. It's a kooky week. This is a perfect week for a long shot. I'm going with an American. I'm going with Charley Hoffman plus, 150 to 1. You figure out that's 15,000. 150 to 1. There's a lot of zeros there. Listen, he is, I would call him Jordan Spieth light. I think that if you look at the renaissance of Spieth since February, Charley Hoffman has matched it with a little less fanfare, not as many big results in big events, but he still has a couple of second place and top 10 finishes. He has made 4 straight cuts at the Open, including a pair of top 20s. He's 12th this season on the PGA Tour in approach. I need someone who's going to be really solid with the irons. I need someone who plays well in a state like Texas, where you're going to get a lot of wins. He has a lot of experience at 44. He's pretty old to try and win a major, but hey, if Phil can win it at 50, who knows what can happen. And I just love this price, 150 to 1 on a guy who we're used to winning first-round leader contests at the Masters. I think he could be the last man standing Sunday at the Open.
I'll tell you one thing. We got a lot of value on the board and a ton of good bets. We hope that you enjoyed this show. That does it for this edition of Going for the Green. We are all so excited as the Open Championship returns after a long 24 months without it. We hope you enjoyed the show. Definitely enjoy watching the Open. And as always, we wish you nothing but the best of luck with all your wagers. See you next time.